Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you wouldn't mind, I've got just a couple slides to introduce. We all know that last year we did House Bill 348 that allowed us to begin investing in precious metals, a percentage of the rainy day fund. That investment is doing very well. The costs are substantially lower than the other investments in the rainy day fund, and the returns annualized are many times more than what are the typical investments in the rainy day fund. And gold, the Bank of International Settlement has listed gold as the only other tier 1 asset to cash because it is risk-free asset, and the central banks are moving to gold in rapid rates to store the value for the transactions that they make. People are struggling, right? With John Maynard Keynes described the situation very aptly. He said, Lenin is said to have declared the best way to destroy the capitalist system is to debauch the currency. By a continuing process of inflation, it engages all the hidden forces of economic law on the side of destruction in a manner that not one man in a million is able to diagnose. We see where we are now. This is the money supply. The M2 money supply is a curve that's starting to go vertical. The national debt, we know as well, is 36 trillion and increasing at more than 2 trillion a year. And those curves roughly mirror the curve in the increase in the price of gold. Things priced in gold have not gotten more expensive. Houses are not more expensive priced in a fixed standard. It's the fact that our dollar is being taxed out from under us by the increase in the money supply. The U.S. Senate warned about this a year ago. Unanimously, the U.S. Senate in Senate Resolution 600 said that the national debt is the #1 threat to national security. Back in the good old days of 2024, the national debt was 34 trillion. It's now approaching 37 trillion. The interest on the debt alone is $1.1 trillion, and they pointed out, if you see here, that China and Europe are developing alternate payment systems to weaken and dethrone the dollar as a payment system. As we met over the summer in the Precious Metals Study Committee that Treasurer Oaks will talk about, we talked about the prudence of having options, and you can see on the handout that you've got, our good speaker made the statement, it's important for Utahns and businesses to have a variety of options for storing and exchanging the value of their labors, including alternate payment systems and precious metals investments. This is the budget plan, the spending plan for Congress to overspend $2 trillion indefinitely. And as we saw at the Tax Foundation, interest is the second largest expense in the federal budget and soon to be the #1 expense because it's growing 10 times faster than everything else. We've been in a situation like this in World War II. They had the greenbacks, and the greenbacks, they were printing money. State of Oregon at one point said, we're only going to take gold in payment of taxes. We're not going to take greenbacks because they've devalued the currency so badly. And in the case Lane County versus Oregon, the Supreme Court upheld that the state could say we're only going to accept gold for the payment of tax because of the greenbacks being printed so rapidly and devaluing the currency. With that, Mr. Chair, I'd like to turn some time over to the Treasurer. This bill, the substitute, I'm speaking to the substitute that you have in front of you. It's very, very simple. It simply allows a state vendor or service provider to choose to receive payment in gold from the state instead of dollars. And for the state, all it means is setting up another account like a bank account. There are a number of service providers, a couple of them are here and online that can speak to this, but the state can push dollars, the recipient receives gold. And so they're able to have gold that's immediately stored, secured, audited, and the other things that are in the bill. And that really is the simplicity of the bill, but it provides a foundation that we build on as we look to store the value of the earnings and savings of the state and of the people of the state. And with that, I turn some time over to our good treasurer.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Marlo Oaks. I'm the state treasurer here in Utah. And good afternoon, Chair Malloy, Vice Chair Kyle, and distinguished members of the House Business and Labor and Commerce Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to briefly discuss HB 306. And really appreciate Representative Ivory's work on this issue. As directed by HB 348 in last session, we conducted a study and created a report, the Precious Metals Study, and had several meetings over the course of last year and looked at one of the key components was this transactional platform. And so really that's kind of the basis of what we're talking about with HB 306. The platform could facilitate real-time transactions, dollar conversions, and secure gold storage in Utah under strict safety standards. Several precious metals work group members and presenters at meetings highlighted that a state-utilized gold-based transactional platform could offer citizens an alternative payment system, helping to safeguard their purchasing power against the erosion caused by inflation more effectively than reliance on the dollar alone. For a century and a half, gold was money in the United States. However, in 1974, the IRS, by policy, not by law or constitutional amendment, began taxing gold and silver as a capital asset and not as a currency. This means if an individual buys gold, whether in the form of coins, bars, or through a gold-based exchange-traded fund, any gain made when selling that gold, even if only because the value of the dollar went down, is subject to capital gains tax. Furthermore, gold is considered a collectible under IRS policy, subjecting it to the highest capital gains tax rate in the United States. For those who would use gold as money, this tax makes the proposition less attractive. If an individual experiences an increase in the value of their gold holdings and then chooses to transact using that gold, they are currently subject to capital gains tax on the appreciated value. This creates a barrier to using gold on a frequent transactional basis, since each transaction creates a taxable event. This is why advocates for gold-based platforms push for changes to capital gains tax treatment on gold. If gold were fully recognized as money, it should not be subject to capital gains tax. And because the U.S. Constitution specifically cedes a degree of monetary authority to the states, state involvement would likely strengthen the arguments that gold should be treated as money. State utilization of an electronic gold payment platform opens the door for stakeholders to advocate together with the state for federal recognition of gold as non-taxable money, establishing gold once again as a practical monetary alternative to the dollar. Utah already recognizes gold and silver as legal tender. Utah's laws are grounded in Article 1, Section 10 of the U.S. Constitution, which authorizes states to grant legal tender status to gold and silver coins. The Supreme Court has upheld the right of states to accept gold and silver as legal tender. So with that, I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Treasurer Oakes. We do have a couple of the service providers that provide this kind of service that would be among those that an RFP would go out to. This is simply to authorize the treasurer to do a request for information, a request for proposal, and then at that point, it simply allows a vendor or a service provider to have the option of requesting payment in gold. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, and we have some of the others online and in the room that could answer technical questions if you have any of those.
Thank you. So that concludes your presentation.
It does, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, we'll bring it up back to the committee for clarifying questions. And we'll start with Representative Burton.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. If I could, I have a couple. First of all, to either of the good gentlemen in front of me, this is an intriguing idea, but the question is, what additional security issues or problems would this create in the storing of this precious metal? Have we thought about that?
Yeah, it's a great question. Currently, the state holds just under $50 million in gold. We're one of 4 locations in the United States that has a Brinks vault. And that was what was really fortunate when we did HB 348 last year. So about 4 miles west of us is a vault that has the Brinks Fort Knox type security, and we'd be happy to arrange a field trip at some point. We've done those a couple of times, but it's top of the line, world-class security that is all of the other holdings that central banks and others have that store with Brinks and others.
Okay, thank you. And then, if I may, just again, the other question I had is, I got to believe that there's some sort of potential savings in dealing in gold. Is that what we expect, that we'd get some savings in using gold to pay for services, or would it just be straight across?
Yeah, and I think eventually, right, when we get, if it evolves that way, gold is Utah's #1 export. It's also our #1 import. By 7 times #2 on the exports, and more than 2.5 times, or on the exports, and more than 2.5 times on the imports. What this is really getting at, we talk about the housing affordability issues all the time. Priced in gold, houses are actually less expensive than they were when President Nixon declared that he was temporarily taking the United States off the gold standard. In 1971, when he did that, you could buy the average home for $17,000 or 17,000 grams of gold. Today, the $17,000 doesn't get you anywhere close to a down payment, but the 17,000 grams of gold would buy almost 3 houses. And so what's happening is we're losing the purchasing power. Every Utahn and the state itself, we hear it all the time, the wage gap, and that we're trying harder and harder and we can't keep up. It's because as the federal government is creating, adding to the money supply to fund the deficit, it's taxing the value of our earnings and savings out from under us. So this allows, ultimately, as this becomes adopted, every Utahn, not just the wealthy, not just those that could afford a 400-ounce bar, it would allow everyone that could invest $5, $100 in an electronic gold-backed, physically gold-backed system, and the loaf of bread that cost a few dollars this year would cost the same amount of gold a couple of years from now or a decade from now. And that's really what is at the heart of this, is preserving the rainy day funds for the state, preserving the purchasing power, and making that option available for those that are vendors and service providers to the state as step one.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Thurston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have a question for the state treasurer. It was represented that gold is a risk-free asset. Would you care to comment on how you think of gold being a risk-free asset?
So it's in the Basel III standards from the Bank of International Settlements. Physical gold was changed from a Tier 3 asset to a Tier 1 asset. And so essentially not requiring any additional capital to back it, so similar to T-bill.
But it's not actually risk-free, right? There is...
Well, in terms of fluctuation relative to dollars, certainly there's risk there, right?
Well,
so
fluctuation, I mean,
yeah,
could be fluctuation relating to eggs, right?
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
anything. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no other questions, we'll open it up to the public. Would anybody from the public like to comment on this? Okay, let's see, we got 4 people. Okay, come on up, just take a few minutes. Don't be shy. Please identify yourself and your organization and fill out the clipboard.
Yes, my name is Lawrence Hilton, and I am General Counsel for the United Precious Metals Association, which was formed the year after Utah became the first state in more than 100 years to recognize gold and silver as legal tender. And I just wanted to speak in support of this legislative action. And also let me just mention about UPMA. We have about 50,000 members, half of which are in the state of Utah. And so for more than a decade, UPMA members have been transacting with each other electronically and physically using gold and silver as legal tender. And that movement was really spurred on by the action taken by the legislature some 10 years ago. And I just also wanted to say how much the association appreciates the in-depth study that was conducted by the treasurer. We were invited to participate in that. They've heard our input. We've raised certain points regarding the implementation phase of what's contemplated today, and have received assurance that that issues that we've raised will be addressed. So I just want to express support for this bill and leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
My name is Brooke Stevens, and I'm the Civic Engagement Director for Utah Moms for America, and we support this bill. We love that it gives us the ability to have confidence in the future for our children, especially when it comes to purchasing homes. $17,000 isn't a lot, but the same amount of gold, and so it gives more security as we plan for our families. And also, when Nixon took it off in 1971, knowing that it was only temporary and it hasn't yet been restored. And so I was Googling what's going on with, why would you take it away from being backed in gold, and what's the benefit of that? And part of the benefit was that you can, if you can trust the system of government to management and control interest rates and whatever. But if you don't have a trust in that system, gold is the standard. We need to diversify and make sure that the gold is being brought back in, and our example can influence the nation for that. So please vote for this bill.
Thank you. I think we have a question for you.
Did you sign it?
Oh, okay. Okay. All right, who's next?
Marianne Christensen, I'm Executive Director of Utah Legislative Watch. We're very much in support of this bill and the whole idea that Utah can become a depository for gold, and that we can use gold the same way that we use the US dollar. We've been through 4 years of economic policy that has really made life difficult for us with massive inflation. I took a huge hit on my investments. And during the last 4 years, there's been a significant rise in the influence of the BRICS currency, which was getting to the point where it actually could knock the US dollar off of the chosen world currency, which would have been disastrous for the US dollar. So to move our assets into gold is just the prudent thing to do. We love the system that surrounds this. It used to be, I've always been taught that gold is the very best investment because it always holds its value and gains value. And it used to be you bought gold and you stuck it in a vault, you stuck it in a safe somewhere, and now they've figured out how to let us own gold and then use it like we use any other kind of currency. I think that's brilliant. I'm really excited about the idea, and so I hope you support the bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Who else from the public would like to speak? Come on up.
Gail Rosika with Utah Eagle Forum, and I just want to speak in support of this bill. Several years ago, I was sitting here speaking in favor of the bill we passed those many years ago that you've heard about today. And I just feel the same way now. There's not a better thing that we could do than to make sure that we're involved in gold for the state, for the people who live here. Just please vote yes on this bill.
Thank you. Anybody else from the public? Okay, we're going to close public. Oh, we have one online. Thank you. Kevin Freeman, if you could turn on your video and unmute, you have a few minutes.
Yes, I've done so. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay, my name is Kevin Freeman. I'm from the Economic War Room. I have no economic interest in this, only a desire to see the economy strong and the Constitution followed. By way of background, I'm an economist, best-selling author, TV host of Economic War Room on Blaze TV, host of Pirate Money Radio on American Family Radio, former contracted economic warfare consultant to the DoD. My last book was titled Pirate Money, and it was all about constitutional currency and doing exactly what we're talking about here, using gold and silver as money. This book culminates a lifetime of study on the Constitution, the history of money, inflation, types of money, and the role that gold and silver can serve as money at the state level. I've got a bunch of main points in support of HB 307. One is gold and silver are money, true biblically, historically, constitutionally. 2, Utah is a gold and silver state, as Representative Ivory said. 3, gold and silver protect against federal overreach. 4, inflation is a problem. We've already noted the dollar has lost 90% of its purchasing power since 1971, but gold and silver have the same purchasing power as they did 10, 20, 50, or 100 years ago. The wealthy profit from inflation, the poor are hurt, and that's why we have a wealth gap. 5, with modern technology, gold and silver can be as transactional as US dollars, debit cards, electronic transfers, and everyone can afford gold this way. 6, this is about optionality, giving people a choice in currency which fits the direction the economy is headed. Bitcoin and cryptocurrency demonstrate that payments are changing, but gold and silver are constitutional alternatives. 7, the power for states to make gold and silver as legal tender is enshrined in the Constitution, and this can be bullion or coin, noted in Lane County versus Oregon, Bronson versus Rhodes, 2 notable Supreme Court cases founded in logic, the founders' intent, and the simple language of the Constitution. Number 8, states can use this authority to create a circulating currency, but only as long as it's gold and silver, as noted in Briscoe versus Bank of Kentucky, another Supreme Court case. 9, this bill enables vendors and employees to have a choice in payments and is fully in line with points number 1 through 8, and it provides for economic justice as such. Number 10, this is part of a national movement. There are at least 24 states that I'm working with that are looking to adopt gold and silver as payments. This has come about following the release of my book, Pirate Money, and we've received massive support from scholars, economists, historians, legal analysts, grassroots groups, and legislators. We have reason to believe that the Trump administration will be supportive as well. And having said that, Utah has been and should remain a leader in constitutional currency. HB 306 is an important move forward. In closing, I will suggest that those women and men here who advance this legislation will be doing something of historical significance for the people, befitting the times that we're in. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, now we're going to close public comment, bring it back to the committee for further discussion and action. Representative Burton.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just for clarification, we have a sub online, and I'm assuming the sponsor spoke to the sub. All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just then make a motion that we approve first substitute House Bill 306.
Okay, we have a motion to adopt the first substitute HB 306 precious metal amendments. We'll go to the sponsor for comment.
I'll waive.
On the substitute. Okay, and then back to the maker of the motion.
Waive.
Back to the committee. Okay, the committee. Anything that the committee would like to discuss? Okay, so seeing none, the motion is to adopt first substitute HB 306 precious metal amendments. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that substitute is adopted unanimously. We'll go to Representative Wilcox.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion that we pass out favorably for substitute House Bill 306.
Okay, the motion is to pass out favorably first substitute HB 306 precious metal amendments. We'll go to the sponsor.
I'd like to speak to that if I could.
Yeah, I appreciate this. This is a small step. This is not changing the monetary system, any of that. It simply allows a vendor or a service provider to the state to elect to be paid in gold. But as Article 1, Section 10 of the U.S. Constitution says, no state shall make anything but gold and silver legal tender and payment of debts. If you think that the debt is going to increase and they're going to increase the money supply, historically, gold has followed that same curve. This is a way that we help the state, providers to the state, and if in the future the legislature decides to build on this with the dozens of other states that are working on this, we can move forward to help the people in our state preserve the purchasing power of their earnings and savings, which I would submit is the best thing we could do for home affordability, for the ability to keep up with the standard of living in our state. And since it is our #1 export and import, the study group will continue, that we continue to advance and promote this fintech effort in our state that is part of our major resource. So with that, I would encourage the support of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. We'll bring it back to the committee for further discussion. Seeing now, we'll go back to the maker of the motion, Representative Wilcox.
Yeah, thank you, Representative, for bringing the bill and advancing the ball still. Those of us that were here in the olden days, so Representative Dunnigan, and of course, Representative Ivory, remember our friend Representative Galvez. I can't vote on this bill without thinking about Brad. And, you know, seeing Larry come up here again, and this was, he only got to serve the one term with us, and was way ahead of his time in seeing where our country was heading on the fiscal cliff and trying to help make sure that Utah was prepared for it. So while I didn't understand it at the time, certainly since, what was it, 2011 that we did that?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's been borne out. So thank you for building on that legacy and helping us to make sure that the state's prepared as we can be. So thank you, Representative. Please vote for it.
Thank you, Representative. Okay, we will take a roll call vote.
Representatives Ballard. Yes. Burton. Yes. Dunnigan. Yes. Ivory.
Yes.
Matthews. Yes. Nguyen. Yes. Peterson. Yes. Roberts. Yes. Sawyer. Yes. Thurston. Yes. White. Yes. Wilcox. Yes. Vice Chair Kyle. Yes. Chairman Loy.
Yes. Okay, thank you. The bill passes unanimously. Thank you, Representative.